The courtroom was silent when the judge raised a glossy photograph of my front door as if it were a weapon in a major trial. She stared at it for a long moment before speaking. "So this navy blue door is the basis of your complaint?" she asked, disbelief dripping from every word. Across the aisle, the HOA's attorney lifted his chin as though the fate of civilization depended on this door. He insisted it wasn't just the color that my entire home violated community standards, from the roofline to the window frames. The judge looked at him flatly. "But he doesn't live in your community," she said, sounding genuinely confused. In the front row, the HOA president, Linda Carver, tightened her grip on a thick binder labeled Pineview HOA Policies. Her name badge glared like a warning sign. She leaned forward, voice filled with frustration, and insisted that my house faced Pineview, and therefore affected their neighborhood appearance. It didn't matter to her that my property wasn't part of their subdivision, wasn't listed on their plat, and wasn't governed by their rules. She wanted control simply because she could see my home from her cul-de-sac. My lawyer slid a printed plat map across the judge's bench, almost with pity. He pointed out the bold boundary line marking Pineview's limits, then tapped the star representing my house, sitting clearly and unmistakably outside the HOA. The judge's eyebrows lifted high as she followed the map. "This home isn't within your authority at all," she said firmly. "Not even close." Linda erupted again about property values and neighborhood harmony. But the judge was done entertaining illusions. She set the map down, folded her hands, and fixed the HOA president with a stern look. "Miss Carver," she said, "you're asking this court to enforce rules on someone who never agreed to them, and I have a feeling you will not appreciate what happens next." Before Pineview HOA tried turning my life into a legal circus, my home was nothing more than a dream finally taking shape. My name is Ethan Ward, a software developer who prefers quiet woods to crowded neighborhoods. For a decade, I saved every spare dollar to build a place where no one could tell me what color my door should be or how tall my grass must remain. When a 5-acre wooded lot went up for sale just beyond Pineview's well-manicured subdivision, I bought it instantly. The listing was crystal clear, unincorporated land, no HOA, county-level zoning only. I hired a surveyor who marked every boundary with orange paint and wooden stakes. He assured me my land was fully outside the HOA's reach. "Their rules stop at that fence," he said confidently. I believed him. Unfortunately, Pineview did not believe in boundaries. The trouble began the moment the framing crew lifted the skeleton of my house. My design was a modern farmhouse with dark siding, tall, black-framed windows, and a matte metal roof. To me, it was beautiful. To Linda Carver, the Pineview HOA president, it was a threat to her perfectly synchronized neighborhood. She marched up one morning while I was reviewing blueprints, gripping her HOA binder like it was federal law. Without so much as a greeting, she demanded to know who had approved my non-compliant structure. When I pointed to my county permit nailed to a tree, she looked genuinely offended. She claimed that because my home could be seen from Pineview, I was obligated to follow their aesthetics in spirit. I told her that wasn't how property law worked, but reasoning wasn't part of her vocabulary. From that day forward, Pineview made my land their personal battleground. HOA board members appeared at the edge of my property, taking photos, counting trees, and scribbling measurements. I received letters accusing me of violating Pineview rules I'd never signed, demanding I halt construction and submit designs for their approval. Each letter felt more desperate than the last. Their subdivision might have been uniform, but their obsession with controlling land they didn't own was anything but. The first official shot, fired by Pineview HOA, arrived in my temporary mailbox while the plumbing was still unfinished. It was a neatly folded, overly formal letter titled, "Notice of Non-Compliant Construction." According to them, my home violated their rules on exterior color, window design, roofing material, and community harmony standards. I laughed, then wrote a short reply. "I am not, nor have I ever been, part of the Pineview HOA. Please direct your concerns elsewhere." I mailed it back and assumed the nonsense would stop. I was wrong. spectacularly wrong. Within days, HOA board members started appearing at the boundary of my land like survey-happy ghosts. One man, with a tape measure, paced along my driveway, counting steps. Another stood on a stepladder trying to peer over my fence. A woman with sunglasses and a sun hat scribbled into a notebook as if my siding color was a national emergency. It would have been comical if it wasn't so invasive. Then came the second letter. This one was thicker, stapled, and dripping with legal-sounding threats. Pineview demanded I cease all construction immediately until I submitted formal plans to their architectural review committee. They gave me 10 days. 10 days to obey rules that had absolutely zero authority over my land. I sent back another letter, slightly less polite this time, reminding them again of their lack of jurisdiction. Their response was not silence, it was escalation. One morning before sunrise, I found Linda Carver and 2 Pineview board members walking along the edge of my property with a laser measuring device. They were calculating something: distance, angles, sight lines, maybe even how many minutes of HOA-approved sunlight my home was supposedly stealing from theirs. When I confronted them, Linda simply announced, "We're documenting violations." She said it like she was performing a noble civil service rather than trespassing at dawn. By this point, Pineview wasn't just annoyed, they were obsessed. My house had become the enemy in a war they invented, and every new board member sighting was another reminder that they fully intended to win. What I didn't know yet was just how far Linda was willing to go. The morning everything shifted started with the sound of heavy machinery growling somewhere down the road. At first, I thought it was normal construction noise from the new homes being built in Pineview, but the rumble kept getting louder, closer, until 2 massive yellow bulldozers appeared at the end of my gravel driveway like metal beasts ready to charge. Behind them stood Linda Carver, arms crossed, HOA binder in hand, and a face so smug it could have been carved into stone. She gestured for the drivers to wait, then marched toward me as if she owned the dirt under my boots. "Mr. Blake," she said sharply, "you've ignored multiple notices. As of today, Pineview is preparing to enforce compliance." I raised an eyebrow. "With bulldozers?" She didn't flinch. "Your driveway is not aligned with community standards. Your home's elevation impacts neighborhood visibility. And your roof, well, that certainly doesn't meet approved colors. These machines will correct the non-compliant portions of your land before construction continues." I stared at her, stunned. "You're planning to bulldoze my property, the property you don't control?" Linda's expression tightened. "We're acting under Emergency Visual Impact Authority." That wasn't a real thing, not in any legal sense. But Pineview had clearly decided to invent powers. When reality refused to cooperate, the bulldozer engines revved as if on cue. Dust swirled. Linda gave a small, satisfied nod toward the operators, as if she'd already won. I stepped forward, planting myself between her and the machines. "You bring those things 1 inch onto my land," I said, voice steady, "and I'll call the sheriff." Her smile faltered for the first time. "This is Pineview business. Law enforcement has no place in architectural matters." I pulled out my phone. "We'll see." For one long moment, she hesitated. The bulldozer drivers waited for her signal. She opened her binder, flipping through pages with trembling fingers, searching for something, anything, that would justify her madness. But she found nothing. And for the first time, Linda looked unsure. She snapped the binder shut. "Fine, but this isn't over." She motioned to the drivers, and the bulldozers retreated slowly, rumbling back toward the paved streets of Pineview. The threat had passed for now, but the message was clear. They weren't done. They were just regrouping. What I didn't know was that their next move would drag us all the way into a courtroom. 2 days after the bulldozer stunt, I was hauling lumber to the back of the property when I heard a car pull up near the gate. I expected another HOA volunteer with a clipboard, or maybe Linda herself, ready to announce whatever new imaginary ordinance she'd invented overnight. But instead, a county sheriff's SUV sat idling at the entrance. Deputy Harris stepped out, a tall man with sunburned cheeks and the patient expression of someone who had broken up far too many neighborhood disputes for one lifetime. He adjusted his hat and walked over to me calmly. "Morning, Mr. Blake," he said. "We got a report from Pineview HOA claiming you're constructing illegally and refusing mandated inspections." There it was, their next attack. I wiped my hands on my jeans. "Deputy, my property isn't part of Pineview. They don't have jurisdiction. I've got county permits. Everything is legal." He nodded slowly. "I figured. But when the HOA calls claiming safety violations, we have to check. Mind showing me the paperwork?" I led him to the temporary site office where my documents were pinned neatly to the wall. He scanned through the building permit, zoning certification, and survey maps. His eyebrows rose when he saw the bold line marking Pineview's boundary clearly on the opposite side of the fence. "Well," he said, exhaling, "that settles it. You're clean. Can we talk about the bulldozers they tried to send in?" I asked. That got his attention. He looked up sharply. "Bulldozers? Onto your land?" They were about 30 seconds from pushing dirt before I told them I'd call you. Deputy Harris's jaw tightened. "They can't touch county land. Not without your permission. Or a court order. And they sure don't have either." He closed the folder and radioed something back to dispatch. Then he turned to me with a firm look. "I'll handle Pineview. They're crossing lines they shouldn't be anywhere near." Before leaving, he gave me a final piece of advice. "If they try anything else, anything at all, you call me directly. Don't let them bully you." As his SUV drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. Relief. The law was on my side. But Pineview wasn't done. Later that evening, a certified letter arrived. Inside was a neatly typed notice from their attorney, 3 pages long, accusing me of visual disruption, aesthetic contamination, and community disharmony. And then the final line: "Failure to immediately comply will result in legal action." They had officially escalated, and the courtroom showdown was about to begin. The morning the lawsuit arrived, I was tightening a beam on the back porch frame when I heard an unfamiliar car pull up to the gate. A man in a navy suit climbed out, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the smile of someone who charges by the minute. He didn't introduce himself. He simply held out a thick envelope. "Service of legal documents for Mr. Daniel Blake," he said. I wiped the sawdust off my hands, looked at the envelope, then at him. "Let me guess. Pineview?" He gave a smug, proud little nod. "My clients are prepared to address your continued non-compliance. I suggest you read the filing thoroughly. This won't go well for you if ignored." He turned on his heel, got back into his car, and drove off without another word. Classic HOA attitude. Dramatic, overconfident, and legally clueless. Inside the envelope was a copy of the complaint filed with the county court. I read the first paragraph and almost laughed out loud. They were accusing me of willful architectural disruption, neighborhood destabilization, and my personal favorite, destroying the visual integrity of Pineview. But one detail stood out like a flashing neon sign. They listed my property as Lot 44, Pineview Subdivision. My eyebrows rose. That lot didn't exist. Not only was my land outside the HOA, it wasn't part of their recorded subdivision at all. In legal terms, they were claiming authority over a parcel they didn't own, didn't govern, and didn't even have mapped. I immediately called my attorney, a calm, sharp woman named Marissa Grant, who loved 2 things: black coffee and humiliating poorly prepared opponents. "They filed?" she asked when she picked up. "Oh yeah," I said, "and they made a mistake big enough to drive a bulldozer through." "Let me guess," she replied. "They claimed your land as part of Pineview?" I laughed. Exactly. She didn't laugh back, not because she was worried, but because she was already strategizing. Good. Excellent. Their case just collapsed before it even started. Not only is their claim invalid, this could be grounds for sanctions. "Sanctions?" I repeated. She explained. If they knowingly filed a false statement in court documents or didn't bother verifying property records, the judge can penalize them financially, publicly, legally. Suddenly, the lawsuit didn't feel like a threat anymore. It felt like an opportunity. That evening, I heard voices over by the fence line. When I walked over, I saw Linda and 2 HOA board members huddled together with a stack of papers. They went quiet when they saw me. Linda crossed her arms. "You'll be hearing from the court soon. Our community is fully prepared." I smiled calmly. "I know, and I hope you're prepared too." "For what?" she snapped. "For the judge asking why you're suing someone who doesn't live in Pineview." The look on her face was priceless, a mix of confusion, denial, and the slow dawning realization that she might have stepped way over the line. She didn't say another word. She simply turned and walked away, stiff and silent. That's when I knew the tide had officially shifted. The HOA wasn't in control anymore, and judging by the panic in Linda's eyes, they finally understood. They weren't dragging me into a courtroom showdown. I was dragging them. The day of the hearing arrived faster than I expected. I walked into the Cedar Hollow County Courthouse, wearing jeans, boots, and a clean shirt, not because I wanted to look rebellious, but because I refused to dress up for a lawsuit that shouldn't have existed in the first place. Pineview HOA arrived like they were attending a royal ceremony. Linda wore a navy blazer sharp enough to cut glass. The treasurer clutched a binder thicker than a phone book, and their attorney strutted in with the arrogance of a man who thought he was already victorious. Inside the courtroom, people filled nearly every bench. Some were Pineview residents curious about the drama. Others were locals who had heard gossip about an HOA trying to annex land outside their borders. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Halstead, entered with an expression that said she had already lost patience and we hadn't even begun. The HOA attorney opened first, launching into a dramatic speech about protecting community standards and preserving uniformity. He spoke like Pineview was a historic district instead of a subdivision built 3 years ago. Then he made the mistake. He presented a poster-sized plat map, tapping on a highlighted section with a flourish. "Your Honor, as you can see, the defendant's home undermines the visual harmony of Pineview. His structure occupies Lot 44, which is within direct influence of our subdivision." Judge Halstead frowned. "Lot 44? Yes, Your Honor," he said proudly, like a magician, revealing his final trick. My attorney, Marissa, slowly stood. "Permission to approach the map, Your Honor?" "Granted," the judge said. Marissa walked over and studied the highlighted section for a moment. Then she spoke clearly, almost casually. "This map is incorrect." The courtroom rustled with whispers. The HOA attorney stiffened. "Excuse me?" She turned toward him. "This map appears to show the Pineview boundary extending onto my client's land, but the official county plat records tell a different story. Your Honor, may I present Exhibit A?" The judge nodded. Marissa handed over a certified county document, the actual recorded plat. Judge Halstead adjusted her glasses and scanned it carefully. "According to the county," Marissa continued, "Pineview ends at parcel 19. My client's home sits entirely on parcel 52 of Cedar Hollow Township, which is not listed under Pineview jurisdiction, meaning the HOA is asserting authority over land it does not own, does not control, and has never legally governed." The judge's eyebrow rose so sharply I thought it might detach. "You're telling me," she said slowly, "the HOA filed a lawsuit over a house that is not, and has never been, part of their subdivision?" Marissa nodded. "Correct." The judge turned to the HOA attorney. "Is this true?" he stuttered. "Well, it is within visual influence, and—" "Visual influence?" the judge repeated. Deadpan. "Are you suggesting a homeowners association has authority over everything visible from its cul-de-sac?" A few people in the audience laughed under their breath. The attorney's confidence melted like butter on a hot sidewalk. Linda leaned forward in her seat, face pale. eyes darting between the judge and her lawyer as if silently begging him to fix this disaster. The judge set the plat down firmly. "This case is already in dangerous territory," she said. "Filing a lawsuit without confirming jurisdiction is sloppy. Filing a lawsuit knowing you lack jurisdiction would be fraud." The HOA attorney swallowed so hard I heard it from across the room. "And furthermore," the judge continued, "the defendant has county-approved permits for every aspect of construction. So the only issue before the court is this question of uniformity claimed by the HOA." She paused, letting the silence build. Then she delivered the blow. "Uniformity," she said, "does not grant legal control over land outside the HOA's boundaries. This lawsuit should never have been filed." Linda's face crumpled. The treasurer closed his binder slowly, as if hoping no one would notice. The judge turned to Marissa. "Miss Grant, you may proceed with your counterclaim." The counterclaim. The one Pineview never saw coming. At that moment, I realized the HOA didn't simply lose. They had set themselves on fire and were about to learn just how hot the consequences could get. Marissa approached the evidence table with quiet confidence, flipping open a large binder that looked heavy enough to dent a desk. She didn't need theatrics, her calm demeanor said, more than any flourish of words. The courtroom went still, the weight of the moment pressing on everyone present. Even the judge leaned in slightly, sensing the gravity of what was about to be revealed. "This binder," Marissa began, "contains documented proof of Pineview HOA's repeated attempts to interfere with my client's property. These are official letters, recorded complaints, and photographic evidence spanning 6 months. Exhibit A shows multiple instances where HOA members entered the defendant's land without permission, measuring trees, assessing property lines, and taking photos without consent." A murmur ran through the audience. A few heads turned sharply toward Linda, whose hands gripped the edge of her seat so tightly that her knuckles were white. Marissa didn't stop. Exhibit B includes certified complaints filed with the county zoning office, all of which were false or misleading, intended to create the appearance of legal authority where none exists. Exhibit C demonstrates water diversion from the defendant's property to HOA irrigation systems, an unauthorized and illegal act documented with county water department records. The judge's eyebrows furrowed. "Unauthorized water diversion?" "Yes, Your Honor," Marissa said firmly. "The HOA rerouted over 700,000 gallons of water from my client's private well to irrigate their common areas, all without consent. Evidence includes billing records, official complaints, and photographic proof of connections made without permits." Linda's composure cracked. She opened her mouth to speak, but the judge held up a hand. "Quiet. Let the attorney finish." Marissa turned to the judge, placing a copy of a signed affidavit in front of her. "We also have witness statements from neighbors, county inspectors, and contractors confirming repeated trespassing, intimidation, and harassment by HOA members, including their president. This pattern shows willful disregard for private property rights and demonstrates intent to coerce my client into complying with rules that legally do not apply to him." The judge paused, reviewing the documents carefully. The silence in the courtroom felt like a held breath. Even the audience leaned forward, sensing the unfolding disaster for the HOA. "I will also note," Marissa continued, "that the HOA engaged in intimidation tactics, emails, letters, and in-person confrontations, attempted to pressure my client into altering the exterior of his home and ceasing construction on his legally owned land. This is not just overreach, it is harassment." The courtroom erupted in quiet shock. Some spectators whispered, others gasped audibly. Linda's face turned a shade of red that made her pale blazer look pink. She looked to her attorney for guidance, but he was frozen, scanning the binder as if hoping for a miracle. The judge leaned back, adjusting her glasses. "Miss Grant, it appears your client has substantial evidence supporting claims of harassment and unauthorized interference. I will allow the counterclaim to proceed, and the HOA will have to answer to these allegations immediately." Linda's mouth opened, then closed. She tried to speak, but no words came out. For the first time, it was clear. The tide had turned. I sat in my chair, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Derek leaned over, whispering, "Looks like they just signed their own eviction notice." Marissa shot him a small, satisfied smile but returned to the bench, placing the next set of documents carefully in front of the judge. "Exhibit D," she said, "details financial discrepancies in HOA accounts, including diverted funds from maintenance fees into private accounts held by the president and treasurer. These funds were used for personal expenses, unrelated to community upkeep." The judge's face darkened. "This is criminal activity," she muttered. "We'll need full access to those accounts immediately." Linda's shoulders sagged. The HOA attorney whispered frantically, but his arguments now sounded hollow, powerless against a mountain of evidence that spoke louder than any speech could. Marissa closed the binder with a deliberate thud. "Your Honor, my client requests relief for trespassing, water diversion, and harassment, in addition to confirmation that his property rights remain fully intact. Any attempts to enforce HOA rules outside their jurisdiction are invalid and subject to legal penalties." The courtroom felt electric. Pineview HOA had entered, thinking they could intimidate a neighbor. They were now facing the full force of the law, their own overreach, and a defendant who refused to back down. Judge Halstead finally leaned forward, steepling her fingers. "I believe we have much to discuss," she said gravely. "This matter will require careful consideration, but it seems to me that private property rights and local jurisdiction law have been severely tested in this case. I expect a full briefing and immediate remedies for violations noted here." I felt a sense of calm wash over me. Finally, the truth was on the table, and the HOA had nowhere to hide. Derek leaned over, nudging me. "This is the part where it starts getting interesting." Indeed, it was. The war was far from over, but for the first time, the battlefield had shifted in our favor. The next morning, a flurry of activity surrounded my property. County inspectors arrived with clipboards, cameras, and measuring tools. Derek and I watched from the porch as they examined every corner, every connection, and every inch of the land. It felt surreal after months of intimidation. The law had finally swung in our favor. The first inspector, a stern-looking man named Mr. Hargrove, approached me with a nod. "Mr. Carson," he said, using my new pseudonym for privacy, "we've reviewed the evidence submitted yesterday. Unauthorized HOA activity is evident, and their claims regarding your construction have no legal basis." Derek grinned, whispering, "Finally, someone speaking sense around here." Inside, the HOA president, Linda Moreau, and her treasurer, along with a handful of board members, stood at the edge of the property line, glaring like wolves who had lost their prey. Their faces were tight, controlled, but their frustration was palpable. Every glance they shot our way was met with a calm smile from Marissa, who had joined us to oversee the inspection. As the inspectors walked the property, measuring and photographing, Linda stormed forward. "This is ridiculous," she yelled. "You cannot ignore our community standards. We have bylaws that must be followed." Marissa turned to her, voice cool but firm. "Your bylaws do not extend beyond your subdivision, Miss Moreau. Mr. Carson's land is entirely outside your jurisdiction. Any attempt to enforce your rules here is legally null and void." Linda's lips trembled with fury, and the treasurer muttered under his breath, clearly stunned. "We've never had this happen before," he whispered to the others. By mid-morning, the inspectors finished their evaluation. Mr. Hargrove returned, holding a formal report. "The HOA's allegations are unsubstantiated. No violations were found. Unauthorized interference with the property is documented, and legal remedies are recommended to prevent future trespassing." Derek let out a low whistle. "That's a clean sweep." Marissa handed me a copy of the report. I scanned the pages, feeling a mix of relief and triumph. The water diversion issue, the harassment, the false complaints all officially recognized as violations. Finally, the mountain of evidence we had gathered had been validated. Linda and the HOA board looked defeated. I could see their minds racing, wondering how they had been outmaneuvered by one man who had simply followed the law. Their carefully constructed world of intimidation was crumbling, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The county inspectors packed up, leaving with a clear message: the land was fully protected, the homeowner's rights intact, and any further interference would result in legal penalties. That evening, Derek and I sat on the porch, beers in hand, watching the sun sink behind the trees. "Think they'll try anything else?" Derek asked. I shook my head, smiling. "They'll try, but after today, they know we play by the rules, and so do the law." For the first time in months, a deep sense of peace settled over the property. The battle was far from over, but the tides had turned. The HOA had underestimated us, underestimated the law, and underestimated the resolve of someone defending what was rightfully theirs. And as night fell, the lights from my nearly completed home glowed warmly, a beacon of victory, independence, and resilience. The following week brought an undeniable sense of triumph. The HOA, stripped of their power to interfere, seemed to shrink back into the shadows of their own frustration. Their letters stopped arriving, their representatives ceased showing up at the property line, and the once constant threat of bulldozers and legal notices faded into silence. I walked the perimeter of my land, surveying the dirt road I had fought so hard to protect. The trench had been smoothed, water lines secured, and the boundaries clearly marked. Every stake, every marker, shouted one thing: this land belonged to me, legally and irreversibly. Derek joined me, carrying a toolbox and a sense of satisfaction that only months of relentless battle could earn. "Feels good, doesn't it?" he said, leaning on the fence. "It feels right," I replied. Finally, no one can push us around. Inside the house, Marissa organized the last documents for the legal team. The auditor's report, water diversion records, and HOA trespass logs were all compiled neatly in a binder labeled "Case Closed." The sense of closure was intoxicating. Every sleepless night, every tense confrontation, every heart-pounding moment of uncertainty had led to this clarity. Meanwhile, word of the victory spread quietly through the county. Neighbors whispered about the audacity of the HOA trying to control land that wasn't theirs. Some were inspired, others simply relieved that the law had prevailed over arrogance and entitlement. For me, the best moment came when I opened the front door, painted a proud navy blue, sunlight glinting off the black-framed windows. No longer a target of bureaucracy or envy, the house finally felt like home. Every board meeting I had attended in my mind, every letter I had written in frustration, every heated conversation with Derek and the inspectors, all culminated in this simple, serene moment. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the wooded horizon, Derek and I sat on the porch with cold drinks in hand, watching the wind rustle the trees. The only sounds were crickets and distant birds returning to their nests. Peace, hard-earned and deeply deserved, enveloped the property. I reflected on the journey, the threats, the manipulations, the relentless HOA, but most importantly, the persistence, the law, and the unwavering support of friends who stood by me. It was a testament to the fact that knowing your rights and standing firm could overcome even the most entitled of adversaries. As night settled, the house glowed softly, a symbol of resilience, independence, and triumph. The battle had been won, not with anger, but with knowledge, patience, and courage. And for the first time in a long while, I could breathe freely, knowing my dream home and my land were finally mine, untouched by bureaucracy, entitlement, or intimidation.